Do you like to go to the candy store? Well, today we're going to talk about the Candyman, Dean Corll.
We here at Angry Me Production want to thank our sponsor, Mobile Notary Mindy. She's certified with the National Notary Association. She's also bonded and E&O insured. She offers a wide range of services including wills, powers of attorney, medical documents, healthcare proxies, living wills, certification of trust, assignment of personal property, HIPAA waivers, advanced healthcare directives, and 99 verification. You can find her on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Mobile Notary Mindy. You can also visit her webpage at texasmobilenotarymindy.com. That's TX, mobilenotarymindy.com. Thank you so much and enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen of all ages, boys and girls, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Angry Meat Production. We appreciate you coming in and letting us be a part of your lives week in and week out. We hope to do our best to present you with something that your eardrums delight in. Whether you're looking at us on YouTube or Rumble, or listening to us on Spotify, Google, or Anchor, or any of the other podcast services that we are currently on or trying to get on, we thank you. And if you don't mind, at the end of every episode, stop by, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If it asks for 5 stars, we'll take 5 stars, even if you don't like us. 5 stars are what it's all about. With that being said, we hope you enjoy our attempt to make our advocation our vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, let the games begin.
Welcome, Angry People. That's right. We're going to go over Dean Corll, which is a Houston area murderer. He was in Texas, but let's get this. We'll get into it. It's a just a ooh. All right. Dean Arnold Corll was born December 24th, 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The first child of Mary Emma Robinson and Arnold Edwin Corll. Corll's father was strict with his children, whereas his mother was markedly protective of both her sons. Their marriage was married by frequent quarreling, and the couple divorced in 1946. 4 years after the birth of their younger son, Stanley Wayne Corll, Mary subsequently sold the family home and relocated to a trailer home in Memphis, Tennessee, where Arnold had been drafted into the United States Air Force after the divorce. To allow her sons to remain in contact with their father, basically, she relocated so she can be the kids could be closer to their father after the draft. Now, Dean Corll was a shy, serious child who rarely socialized with other children, but at the same time displayed concern for well-being of others. At the age of 7, he suffered an undiagnosed case of Stephen Hawking, please, from the grave, come help me out with this scientific term.
Rheumatic fever.
Rheumatic fever, which was not recognized until his doctor found Corll had a heart murmur in 1950. As a result of this diagnosis, Corll was told that to avoid PE class in school. Corll's parents, Dean's parents attempted to relocate and remarry in 1950, subsequently moving to Pasadena, Texas, a suburb of Houston. However, the relocation was short-lived, and in 1953, the couple once again divorced. Apparently, they flip-flopped. with the mother again retaining a custody of their own their two sons. The divorce was granted in amicable grounds, and both boys maintained regular contact with her father. Following the second divorce, Dean's mother, I know they wanted to use the last name. I get it. But we're going Dean. Dean's mother, married a traveling clock salesman named Jake West. The family moved from a small town of Vandor, Texas, where Dean's half sister, Joycey Jeanine, 1955 to about 2016, was born. That's the time frame how long she lived. Dean's mother and stepfather started a small family candy company, initially operating from the garage of their home. From the early days of this business, Dean worked day and night while still attending school. He and his younger brother were responsible for running the candy making machines and packing the product, which his stepfather sold on his sales route. This sales route often involved West traveling to Houston, where they sold most of their products there. From 1954 to 1958, Dean attended Valor High School, where he was regarded as a well-behaved student who actively satisfactory grades, as he has been the case of in his childhood. Corll was also considered somewhat of a loner, although he was known to have occasionally dated girls in his teenage years. In high school, Dean only major interest was bass band, which he played the trombone. Dean graduated from Ballard High School in the summer of 1958. Shortly thereafter, he and his family moved to the northern outskirts of Houston so that the family candy business could be closer to the city where the majority of their product was sold. Dean's family opened a new shop, which they named Pecan Prince. Oh, is it Prince?
Prince,
Prince. It's Prince. Prince. In reference to the brand of the family product in 1960, at the request of his mother, Dean moved to Indiana to live with his widowed grandmother. During this time, Dean formed a close relationship with the local girl. Although he rejected a subsequent marriage proposal she had made to him in 1962, Dean lived in Indiana for almost 2 years, but returned to Houston in 1962 to help with his family's candy business, which by this date had moved to the Houston Heights. He later moved into the apartment of word's not good right now. He later moved into an apartment of his own above the shop. Dean's mother divorced West in 1963 and opened a new candy business, which she named Corll Candy Company. Oh, you know what? I'm curious if that actually candy company's still around. I know it's probably going to tell me later down the road if it had been or it hadn't been, but we're going to skip ahead for a little bit. No, I don't think it did. Is still doesn't say anything about being open still. No, I don't think that the company's filing status is listed as forfeited, so I don't think it actually exists anymore. So if you want to have Corll Candy Company name, you can. That'd be really weird having a candy company. You know what? Serial killer candy company. You just name like your candy. You know what? I might not need to shut up and make that a thing later down the road. I'm gonna have to edit this. I'm not editing this. I'm good. Okay. Okay. Her eldest son was appointed vice president of the new family firm, and is her younger brother Stanley being appointed secretary treasury. The same year, one of the teenage male employees of Corll Candy Company complained to Dean's mother that her son had been making sexual advances towards him. In response, she fired the teenager. Protective mothers believing the actual children, other than the actual person that's getting hashtag Me Too movement thing. Anyways, Dean was drafted to the U.S. Army in August 10th, 1964, and assigned to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. He was later assigned to Fort Bennings, Georgia, to train as a radio repairman before he permanently got assigned to Fort Hood, Texas, which is not Fort Hood anymore. I found this out. It is Fort Chavino. Hold on, people. I'm going to get Stephen Hawking's on here. It is
Fort Cavazos.
Fort Cavazos. By the way, if you don't know what Fort Hood is, if you're not prior military or anything like that, Fort Hood in Texas, and sad to say it's in Texas, is a pretty much a trash freaking base. It is serious. The stuff that goes on to that place. I think Dean Carlo left a little bit of his soul at that base because, oh man, the stuff that I could do a research paper on Fort Hood and how much shit goes on there. But I digress, and we'll keep on moving. Look it up. It's weird. According to official military records, Dean prior service in the Army was unblemished. Dean, however, reported hated the military service. He applied for a hardship discharge on the grounds that he was needed to his family business. The Army granted his request, and he was given a honorable discharge June 11th, 1965, after 10 months of service. Reportedly, Dean divulged to some of his close acquaintances after his release from the Army that it was during his prior service that he was first realized that he was homosexual and had experienced his first homosexual encounter there. According to acquaintances, notable subcharges in Dean's mannerisms when in the company of teenage males after he had completed his service and returned to Houston, which led them to believe that he had been homosexual. Okay, whatever. I don't get that last part. Of course, I'm stupid. Following his honorable discharge from the Army, Dean returned to Houston Heights and resumed his position he had held as vice president of Corll's Candy Company. Corll's former stepfather had retained ownership of the family's former candy business, Pecan Prince, following his divorce from Corll's mother in 1963. Competition between the two firms was fierce, as had been the case in his teenage years. Dean increased the number of hours he devoted to the candy business to satisfy an increased public demand for his family's product. In 1965, Corll Candy Company relocated to 22nd Street, directly across from the street of the Helms Elementary School. Oh, this is not going to look good. Corll's known to give free candy to local children. Okay, if you're not watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you can see me just doing my head shake, going, "Oh, this is bad." So if you're anywhere near a school and there's a candy shop, you might be looking at that candy shop. Wink, wink. I'm not winking on video. There we go. In particular, teenage boys. He was giving out these candies too. As a result of this behavior, he earned himself the nickname the Candy Man and the Pied Piper. The company employed a small workforce, and he was seen to behave flirtatiously towards several teenage male employees. Dean is also known to have an installed pool table in the rear of the candy factory where employees and local youth would congregate. In 1967, Carl befriended 12-year-old David Owen Brooks, then a bispec. What the? Stephen Hawking from the grave. Please help me out.
Bespectacled.
Bespectable sixth grade student, and one of the many children to whom he gave free candy to. Brooks initially became one of Dean's many youthful close companions, regularly socializing with Dean's various teenage boys who congregated in the rear of the candy factory. He also joined Dean on regular trips he took to South Texas beaches in the company of various youths. And later, just hold on. This is just very foreshadowing. And yes, I'm reading this because I already know what had happened. And it's sad that I'm getting into this myself. And I'm like looking, and I was like, no, don't do it. I'm literally screaming at this screen in my head, going, don't do that. Don't do that. I've seen this horror movie before. Okay, back to the story. Oh, yeah. God, anyways. And later commented that Dean was the first adult male who did not mock his appearance. Whenever Brooks told Dean he needed cash, Dean would give him money, and the youth began to view Dean as a father figure or an uncle. I'm gonna go with uncle. Upon Dean's urging, a sexual relation gradually developed between the two, beginning in 1969. Dean paid Brooks in cash or with gifts to allow him to form Felocious on the youth, basically BJ. Brooks' parents were divorced. His father lived in Houston. His mother relocated to Belmont. I know I'm saying it wrong. But I have to check. Sorry, people. I know it's kind of ridiculous having a person that has severe dyslexia reading this stuff to you, but you tuned in, not me.
Beaumont.
Yes, Beaumont. Okay, I knew it was right. East of Houston. In 1970, when he was 15, Brooks dropped out of Winthrop High School and moved to Beaumont to live with his mother. Whenever he visited his father in Houston, he also visited Dean, who allowed him to stay in his apartments if he wished. Later in the same year, Brooks moved back to Houston by his own admission. Brooks began regarding Dean's apartment as a second home. By the time Brooks dropped out of high school, Dean's mother and half-sister, Joyce, had moved to Colorado after the failure of their third marriage. Carl's mother, of her third marriage, and the closure of Carl's Candy Company in June 1968. Okay, so just to verify, it did close. Though she often talked to her eldest son on the telephone, his mother never saw him again. Following the closure of the candy company, Carl took a job as an electrician at the Houston Light and Power Company, where he tested electrical relay systems. He worked in this employment until the day of his death. No, he didn't. Because he died. I'm okay. Just he worked there until time to come. Okay. Now I'm so sorry. Sometimes I just get I look at this stuff and I'm like, no, you I'm very impulsive. So sorry. Between 1970 and 1973, between 1970 and 1973, Dean had killed a minimum of 28 victims. There might have been more. All these victims were of the age of 13 to 20, the majority of whom were in their mid-teens. Most of the victims were abducted from Houston Heights and which was then a low-income neighborhood northeast of downtown Houston. In most of these abductions, he was assisted by one or both of his teen accomplices, David Owen Brooks and Emmer Wayne Haley. Several of the victims were friends of one or both of Carl's accomplices. Individuals with whom Dean had himself become acquainted prior to the abduction and murders, and two other victims, Billy Blanche and George Maley Winkley, were former employees of the Corll Candy Company. Dean's victims were usually lured into either one of the two vehicles he'd owned, the Ford Ecoline and the Plymouth GT. Is that? Yeah, GTX. Sorry, I was looking at the car because I was like, oh, GTX, is that the... Okay. Or a 1969 Chevrolet Corvette. He's known to have purchased this for Brooks in the early 1971. This enticement was typically an offer of a party or a lift, and the victim would be driven to Dean's house. At Dean's residence, the youths would be piled with alcohol and other drugs until they passed out, then tricked into donning handcuffs, just like John Wayne Gacy, or simply grabbed by force. John Wayne Gacy, if you haven't looked at the episode or don't know even about the serial killer, he was a clown and he did magic tricks and we'd give him actual real handcuffs. So, and then he would do his thing. They were then stripped naked and tied to either Dean's bed or usually a plywood torture board, which was regularly hung on the wall. Once manacled, the victims would be sexually assaulted, beaten, tortured, and sometimes often for several days, and then killed by strangulation or by a .22 caliber pistol. Their bodies were to tie in plastic sheets and then buried in one of the four places: a rented boat shed in southwest Houston, a beach of Bolivar, Pennsylvania, or a woodland near Lake Sam Rayburn, where Dean family owned a lakeside log cabin, or the beach of Jefferson County. In several instances, Dean forced his victims to either phone or write to their parents explaining why they are absent in an effort to get the family's fears for their son's safety. Get away from the fears of the... sometimes people write stuff and they don't know how to write. He also is known to retaliate keepsakes, usually keys, from his victims. During the years in which he abducted and murdered his victims, Dean often changed addresses. However, until he moved to Pasadena in the spring of 1973, he always lived in or close to Houston Heights. And the first murders, Dean killed his first victim, an 18-year-old college freshman named Jeffrey Conan. I want to get this name right.
Conan.
On September 25th, 1970. Conan vanished while hiking with another student from the University of Texas to his parents' house in Houston. He was dropped off alone at the corner of Westermine Road and South Vaughn Road near the uptown area of Houston at approximately 6:15 p.m. Dean likely offered Conan a lift to his home, which Conan eventually accepted. At this time of Conan's disappearance, Carl lived in Harold Turbluff Apartments, where he had paid a deposit of a month's rent on September 21st. Brooks led police to Conan's body on August 10th, 1973. The body was buried at High Island Beach. For instance, scientists detected that the young had died of asphyxiation caused by manual strangulation. and a cloth gad had been placed around his mouth. Sorry, folks. Hold on real quick. Okay. The body was found buried beneath a large boulder covered in layers of lime, wrapped in plastic, naked, and bound hand and foot with nylon cord, suggesting that he had been violated. About the time of Colin's murder, Brooks interpreted Dean in the act of sexual assaulting two teenage boys, whom Dean had stripped to a 4-post bed. Dean promised Brooks a car in return of his silence. Brooks accepted the offer, and Corll later bought him the green Corvette. Dean later told Brooks that he had killed two of the youths and offered him $200, the equivalent of $1,536 as of 2023, for any boy he could lure into to the apartment. Oh God, I hate people like that. On December 13th, 1970, Brooks lured two 14-year-old Spring Branch youths named James Glass and Danny Yates away from a religious rally held in Houston Heights to Corll's Yorktown apartment. Glass was acquaintance of Brooks, who, at Brooks' behest, had previously visited Dean's address. Both youths were tied to opposite sides of Dean's torture board, subsequently raped, strangled, and buried in a boat shed he had rented in November 17th. An electric cord with alligator clips attached to each end was buried alongside Yates' body. Sorry, people. 6 weeks after the double murder of Glass and Yates on January 30th, 1971, Brooks and Dean encountered two teenage brothers, Donald and Jerry Waldrop, walking towards their parents' home. The Waldrop brothers had been driven to a friend's home by their father with plans to discuss forming a bowling league, and had begun walking home after learning their friend was not home. Both boys were enticed into Dean's van, driven to an apartment Dean had rented to Magnum Road, where they were raped, strangled, and subsequently buried in the boat shed. Between March and May 1971, Dean abducted and killed 3 victims, all of which lived in the Houston Heights area, and all of whom were buried towards the rear of the rented boat shed. In each of these abductions, Brooks is known to have been a participant. One of the 3 victims, 15-year-old Rennie Harvey, was last seen by his family on the afternoon of March 9th, cycling towards Oak Forest, where he worked part-time as a gas station attendant. Harvey was driven to Dean's Magnum. Is that Magnum or Mag? It's Mag. Stephen Hawkins, from the grave, please.
Magnum.
Magum. Road apartments, where he is subsequently killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. The other 2 victims, 13-year-old David Higest and 16-year-old Gregory Manuel Winkley, were abducted and killed together on the afternoon of May 29, 1971. As had been in the case with his parents and other victims of Dean, both sets of parents launched a frantic search for their sons. One of the youths, who voluntarily offered to distribute posters the parents had printed offering money as a reward for information leading to the boys' whereabouts, was 15-year-old Emily Wayne Emmer Wayne Hanley, a lifelong friend of Hal Hilgis. The youth pinned the reward poster around the heights and attempted to reassure the Hygis parents that they might be an innocent explanation of the boy's absence. On August 17th, 1971, Corll and Brooks encountered 17-year-old acquaintance Brooks named Reuben Watson Haley walking home from a movie theater in Houston. Brooks persuaded Haley to attend a party at the address Corll had moved to in San Felipe Street the previous month. Haley agreed and was taken to Dean's home, where he was successfully strangled and buried in, you guessed it, the boat shed. There's got to be a lot of bodies behind that boat shed. Now, in the winter of 1971, Brooks introduced Haley to Dean. Hanley likely was lured to Dean's address as an next intended victim. However, Dean eventually decided the youth would be a good accomplice and offered him the same fee of $200 for any boy he could lure to his apartment, informing Haley that he was involved in a white slavery ring operating from Dallas. It was slavery. I hate that they give, like, it's white slavery, sex slavery. All of it's just slavery. Anyways, Hanley later stated that for several months he ignored Dean's offer, although he did maintain an acquaintance with Dean and gradually began to view him as something as a brother type person whose work ethic was admired and in whom he could confide in. In early 1972, he decided to accept Dean's offer because he and his family were dire financial circumstances. Henley said the first abduction he participated in occurred during the time Dean resided on 925 Schuster Street, an address he moved to on February 9th, 1972. Now, I got to say this. I just realized this, and I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner. But he lives in an apartment. Nobody heard the screams or anything. It always baffles me because I've read several of these serial killers that they lived in an apartment complex. And sometimes they'd said the people would say something and try to, point over to where the screaming was. But you never hear like a mass exodus that there's something really wrong I hear screams sometimes in my apartment complex when I'm heading out the door trying to figure out if there's anything wrong. But anyways, I digress. I'm sorry. Just food for thought for anybody. Brooks later claimed that Hanley became involved in the abductions while Dean resided at the address he occupied immediately prior to Schuster Street. If Hanley's statement is to be believed, the victims was abducted from the Heights in February and early March 1972. In the statement Haley gave to police following his arrest, the youth stated he and Dean picked up a boy at the corner of 11th and Studwood and lured him to Dean's home on the promise of smoking some marijuana with the pair. At Dean's residence, using a ruse he and Dean had prepared, Haley cuffed his own hand behind his back, freeing himself with the key hidden in his back pocket. Then duped the youth in donning the handcuffs before observing Dean bind and gagging him. Haley then left the youth alone. Okay, he gagged him, but still, you can still hear. Anyways, sorry. then left the youth alone with Dean, believing he was to be sold in a sexual slavery ring. The identity of the first victim, Hanley assist in the abduction, remains unknown. 1 month later, March 24th, 1972, Haley, Brooks, and Dean encountered an 18-year-old acquaintance of Haley named Frank Aguirre, leaving a restaurant on Yale Street where the youth worked. Haley called Aguirre over to Carl's van and invited the youth to drink beer and smoke some marijuana with the trio at Carl's apartment. Aguirre agreed and followed the trio into Carl's home in Ramber. Inside Carl's home, Aguirre smoked marijuana with the trio before picking up a pair of handcuffs Carl had left on the table. In response, Carl pounced on Aguilera and pushed him to the table and cuffed his hands behind his back. Haley later claimed that he had not known Carl's true intentions toward Aguilera when he had persuaded his friend to accompany him to Carl's home. In a 2010 interview, he claimed to have attempted to persuade Carl not to assault and kill Aguilera. Once Carl and Brooks had bound and gagged the youth, however, Carl refused, informing Haley that he had raped, tortured, and killed his previous victims he had assisted in abducting, and he had intended to do the same to Aguilera. Haley subsequently assisted Carl and Brooks in Aguilera's burial at High Island Beach. Despite the revelations that Carl was in reality killing the boys he and Brooks had assisted in abduction, Haley nonetheless became an active participant in abduction and murders. 1 month later, in April 20th, he assisted Carl and Brooks in the abduction of another youth, a 17-year-old named Mark Scott. Scott, who was known to both Haley and Brooks, was grabbed by force and fought furiously against an attempt by Dean to restrain him, even attempting to stab his attackers with a knife. However, Scott saw Haley pointing a pistol towards him and acquiring towards Brooks. Scott just give up. Scott was tied and tortured to the torture board, suffering the same fate as Aguilera: rape, torture, strangulation, and burial in High Island Beach. Brooks later stated Haley was especially sadistic in his participating in the murders committed at Schuster Street, and Haley later admitted to gradually becoming a fascinated and how much stamina people would have when the recipient of active murder. Before Carl dedicated the address in June 1920s, June 26th of that year, Haley assisted Carl and Brooks in the abduction and murder of two more boys named Billy Balch and Johnny DeLome. In Brooks' confession, he stated that both youths were tied to Carl's bed, and after their torture and rape, Haley manually Haley manually strangled Butch, then shouted, "Hey, Johnny," and shot DeLome in the forehead with a bullet exiting through his ear. DeLome then pleaded with Haley, "Wayne, please don't," before he was strangled. Both youths were buried in the High Island Beach. During the time Carl resided in Schuster Street, the trio lured a 19-year-old named William Rieger to the house. Rieger was tied to a plywood board, tortured, and abused by Dean. And I'm going to get off all these things. It goes over each and every one of the deaths, and I am spent on this one. Let me go over. Okay. On the evening of August 7th, 1973, Haley, age 17, invited a 20-year-old named Timothy Corll Keeler to attend a party at Dean's Pasadena residence. Curley, a casual acquaintance of Dean, who was intended to be his next victim, accepted the offer. Brooks was not present at the time. The two youths arrived at Dean's house, where they sniffed paint fumes, drank alcohol. Sorry, just the thought of sniffing paint fumes is hilarious to me. Drank alcohol until midnight before leaving the house, promising to return shortly. Haley and Curley then drove back to Houston Heights, and Kaylee parked his vehicle close to Haley's home. The two exited the vehicle, and Haley, hearing commotion across the street, they're using menting.
Emanating.
Commotion across the street emanating from the home of 15-year-old friend Renona Lewis Williams walked towards her home. Williams, nursing a sprained ankle, had been beaten by her drunk father that evening and accepted Haley's invitation to join him and Carl Dean's home. Williams climbed into the back seat of the Curly's Curly Volkswagen. The trio then drove to Dean's Pasadena residence approximately 3 a.m. on the morning of August 8, 1973. Henley and Curly, accompanied by Williams, Renona, returned to Dean's residence. Dean was furious that Haley had brought a girl to his house, telling him in private that he had ruined everything. Haley explained that Williams had argument with her father that evening and did not wish to return. Dean appeared to calm down and offered the trio a beer and marijuana. The three teenagers began drinking and smoking marijuana, with Haley and Curly also sniffing paint fumes. Sorry, just the thought of sniffing paint fumes. Also, as Dean watched them intently, after approaching approximately 2 hours, Haley, Curly, and Williams each passed out. Haley awoke to find himself lying on his stomach and Carl's snapping handcuffs on his wrists. His mouth had been taped shut and his ankles had been brought together. Curly and Williams lay beside Haley, securely bound with a nylon rope, gagged with adhesive tape, and laying face down on the floor. Curly had been stripped naked. Noting Haley had awoken, Dean removed the gag from his mouth. Haley protested in vain against Dean's action, whereupon Dean restrained that he was angry with Hanley for bringing a girl to his house, and that he was going to kill all three teenagers after he assaulted and tortured Curly. Initially saying, "Man, you blew it bringing that girl." Before shouting, "I'm going to kill you all, but first I'm going to have my fun." He then repeatedly kicked Williams in the chest before lifting Hanley to his feet, dragging him into the kitchen and placing a .22 pistol against his stomach, threatening to shoot him. Henley claimed Dean promising to participate in the torture and murder of both Williams and Curly if Dean released him. After approximately 30 minutes of the discussion, Dean agreed and untied Henley. Sorry if I mix up the words each and every time. It's Henley the entire time. I promise you. Sometimes I just mix up words. Then carried Curly and Williams into the bedroom and tied them on an opposite side of his torture board. Curly on his stomach and Williams on his back. He then informed Curly of his intentions to look up his anus as Hernley again began inhaling paint fumes from a paper bag. Dean then handed Hernley a hunting knife and ordered him to cut away Williams's clothes, insisting that while he would rape and kill Curly, Hanley would do likewise to Williams. Hanley began cutting away Williams' clothes as Dean undressed and began to assault and torture Curly. God, Stephen Hawking's. I'm confused on this word.
Curly,
Yeah, Curly. Both Curly and Williams had awake by this point. Curly began writhing and shouting as Williams, whose gag Henley had removed, lifting her head and asked Henley, "Is this for real?" To which Henley answered, "Yes." Williams then asked Henley, "Are you going to do anything about it?" Henley then asked Dean whether he might take Williams into another room. Dean ignored him, and Henley then grabbed Carl's pistol, shouting, "You gone too far, Dean." As Dean clambered, this is intense, clambered off Curly, Henley elaborately, "I can't go on any longer. I can't have you kill all my friends." Dean approached Henley, saying, "Kill me, Wayne." Henley stepped back a few paces as Dean continued to advance upon him, shouting, "You won't do it." Henley then fired at Carl, hit him in the forehead. The bullet failed to penetrate Carl's skull, and he continued to lunge for Henley, whereupon the youth fired another round, hitting Carl in his left shoulder. Carl ran out of the room, hitting a wall of the hallway. Henley fired 3 additional bullets into his lower back and shoulder as Carl slid down the wall in the hallway outside the room where the 2 other teenagers were bound. Carl died where he fell, his naked body laying face down on the wall. Henley would later recall that immediately after he shot Carl, the sole thought in his mind was that Dean would have been proud of the way he had been behaving during the confrontation, adding that Dean had been training him to react quickly and forcefully. And sorry, I got down to the last part of this, and I apologize, but they also put his picture like right below of him dead. He has like white ass and a tan top part. So yes, I'm sorry, but anyways, it's just funny as hell to me. The picture, I can't show the picture. You can find the picture. Just type in his name and it's death, and you can find the picture. God, it's funny as hell. I'm sorry, but not sorry. Adding that Carl had been trained for his reaction quickly and forcefully, that was exactly how he had done. After Hanley had shot Carl, he and Curly began weeping as Curly repeatedly thanked him for saving his life. Hanley then released Curly and Williams from the torture board, and the 3 teenagers dressed and discussed the actions that they should take. Haley suggested to Curly and Williams that they should simply leave, to which Curly replied, "No, we should call the police." Haley agreed and looked up the number of Pasadena Police Department in Carl's telephone book dictionary directory. There we go. At 8:24 p.m. on August 8th, 1973, Hanley placed a call to PPD, the Pasadena Police Department. His call was answered by an operator named Velma Lines. In his call, Hurley blurted out the operator, "Y'all better come right now. I just killed a man." Hurley gave the address to the operator as 2020 Lamar Drive, Pasadena. Kimberly and Williams and Hurley waited upon Carl's porch for the police to arrive. Haley mentioned to Carl that he had been what he had done, killed by shooting 4 to 5 times. Minutes later, the Pasadena Police Department patrol car arrived at 2020 Lamar Drive. The three teenagers were sitting on the porch outside the house, and the officer noted the 22 pistol on the driveway near the trio. Haley told the officers that he was an individual who had made the call and indicated that Carl's body was inside the house. After confiscating the pistol and placing Harley Williams and Curley inside the patrol car, the officer entered the bungalow and discovered Carl's body inside the hallway. The officer returned to the car and read Henley his Miranda rights. In response, Henley said, "I don't care who knows about it. I had to get it off my chest." Curley later told detectives that before the police officer had arrived at Lamar Drive, Henley had informed him, if you wasn't my friend, I could have given $200 for you. Oh, I could have hadn't gotten $200 for you. In PPD custody, Henley was initially questioned about the killings of Dean. He recounted the events of the previous evening and morning, explaining that he had shot Corll in self-defense. The statement given to Curley and Williams corroborated. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. Some words I have to like speak and spell out. Corroborated. Haley's account. You can figure out the words if you listen. The detective questioned Henley, believing he had indeed acted in self-defense. When questioned regarding the claims that as Dean had threatened him that morning, he had shouted that he had killed several boys, Henley explained that for almost 3 years, Brooks and he had helped procure teenage boys, some of whom he had were their own friends, for Dean, who had raped and murdered them. Henley gave a verbal statement stating that he initially had believed the boys had been abducted, were sold into Dallas, homosexual acts and sodomy, maybe killed later. But soon learned Dean was killing himself. And Haley admitted he assisted Dean in several abductions and murders, and that he had actively participated in the torture and mutilation of 6 or 8 victims prior to their murder. Most victims had been buried in Southwest Houston boat shed, and others at Lake Sam Rayborn and the High Island Beach. Corll had paid up to $200 for each victim Brooks or he had available to lure to the apartment. Police initially were skeptical of Hanley's claims, assuming the sole homicide of the case of what was Dean, which they had described as being the result of a drug-fueled fisticuffs that had turned deadly. Hanley was quite insistent, however, upon his recalling the names of 3 boys, Cobble, Hillguest, and Jones, whom he had stated he and Brooks had procured for Dean. The police accepted that there was something to his claims, as all 3 teenagers were listed as missing in the Houston Police Department headquarters. Hillguest was reportedly missing in the summer of 1971, and the other 2 boys were missing for just 2 weeks. Moreover, the floor of the room where the 3 teenagers had been tied was covered in thick plastic sheet. Police also found a plywood torture board measuring 8 by 3 feet, 2.44 by 0.91 meters for those of the other side of the pond, with handcuffs attached to the nylon ropes to 2 corners and the nylon ropes the other 2. Also found at Dean's address were a large hunting knife, rolls of clear plastic of the same type used to cover the floor, a portable radio rigged to the pair of the dry cells to give increasing volume. the electric motor with loose wires attached, 8 pairs of handcuffs, and a number of dildos, thin glass tubes, and lengths of rope. Dean's Ford Ecoline. Is that Ecoline?
Ecoline.
Ecoline. Van parked in the driveway converted a similar impression. The rear windows of the van were sealed by opaque blue curtains. With the rear of the vehicle, police found a coil of rope, a swatch of bed rug covers and soiled stain, and a wood crate with air holes drilled to the side. The pegboard walls inside the rear of the van were rigged with several rings and hooks. Other wooden crates with air holes drilled into them. The side was found in Dean's backyard. Inside this crate was several standing human hair. Now, Hanley agreed to accompany police to Dean's boat shed in southwest Houston, where he claimed that the bodies of most of the victims had been found. Inside the boat shed, police found a half-strip stolen car, a child's bike, a large iron drum, water containers, and 2 sacks of lime, and a large plastic bag filled of teenage boys' clothing. 2 prison trustees. 2 prison trustees began digging through the soft, crushed shell earth of the boat shed and soon uncovered a body of a blonde-haired teenage boy lying on his side, encased in clear plastic and buried beneath a layer of lime. Police continued excavating throughout the excavating through the earth of the shed, unearthing the remains of more victims in various stages of decomposition. Most of the bodies found were wrapped in thick, clear plastic sheathings. Some victims had been the ligatures still wrapped tightly around their necks, and basically the thing that choked and killed them. All the victims were found to have been sodomized, and some of the victims found bore evidence of sexual torture. Pubic hairs had been plucked out, and genitals were chewed. Okay. Objects had been inserted into the rectum, and glass rods had been inserted into the urethra and smacked. Give me a second. Okay. Basically, he put glass rods through the pee hole, and broke the glass inside the pee hole. Oh my God, that's actually a torture in where was it? It was during World War II, and did that, and they would pull the string. But oh my God, clothing ran inserted into the victim's mouth, and adhesive tape wounded around their faces that muffled their screams. Tongues of these first victims uncovered produced over 1 inch beyond the tooth margin. The mouth of the 3 victims unearthed on August 8th was so gaping that all upper and lower teeth were visible. Okay. Leading investigators to theorize the youth had died screaming. After the recovery of the 8th body from the boat shed was completed at 11:55 p.m., the investigators was discontinued until the next day. Accompanied by his father, Brooks presented himself to HPD headquarters on the evening of August 8th and gave a statement to which he denied any participating in the murders, but admitted to having known that Dean had raped and killed 2 youths in 1970. On the morning of August 9th, Henley gave a full written statement detailing his and Brooks' involvement with Dean in the abduction and murders of numerous youths. In this confession, Haley repeatedly admitted to having personally killed and apprehended 9 youths and to have assisted Dean in the strangulation of others. He stated that only 3 abductions and murders Brooks had not assisted him and Dean with were committed in the summer of 1973. That afternoon, Haley accompanied police to Lake Sam Rayborn, where he, Brooks, and Dean had buried the victims killed in the last year. 2 additional bodies were found in the shallow, lime-soaked graves located close to the dirt road inside the lakeside log cabin owned by the Dean Corll family. Police found a second plywood torture board, a roll of plastic sheets, shovels, and a sack of lime. Police found 9 additional bodies in the boat shed on August 9th. These bodies were recovered between 12:05 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., and all were in advanced state of decomposition. The 12th body unearthed bore evidence of sexual mutilation. The severed genitals of the victim were found inside a sealed plastic bag placed beside the body. Other victims unearthed had several fractured ribs. The 13th and 14th body unearthed. Hold on. The 13th and 14th bodies unearthed bore identification cards naming the victims Donald and Jerry Waltrip. Brooks gave a full confession on the evening of August 9th, admitting to being present at several killings and assisting on several burials, although he continued to deny any direct participating in the murders. In reference to the torture board upon which Dean had restrained and tortured his victims, Brooks stated once they were on the board, they were as good as dead. It was all over, but the shouting and crying in reference to the act of the murder. Brooks stated he witnessed the victim's death didn't bother him, adding, I saw it done many a times. He agreed to accompany police to High Island Beach to assess several search of the bodies. On August 10th, 1973, Hanley again accompanied police to Lake Sam Rayborn, where 2 more bodies were found, buried just 10 feet or 3 meters apart. As with the 2 bodies found the previous day, both victims had been tortured and several beaten, particularly around the head. That afternoon, both Henley and Brooks accompanied police to High Island Beach, leading police to a shallow grave of the 2 victims. On August 13th, both Henley and Brooks again accompanied the police to High Island Beach, where 4 more bodies were found, making a total of 27 victims. 27 known victims, the worst killing spree in American history at the time. Hanley initially insisted that there were 2 more bodies to be found inside the boat shed and that the bodies of 2 more boys had been buried at High Island Beach in 1972. At the time, the killing spree was the worst case of serial murder in the terms of number of victims in the United States, seeing 25 attributed to Juan Cardona. I think I've done him before. I went over him. I'll check him out. We'll do him next week, if anything. Who had been... Let me go ahead and get that set up, just in case. Who had been arrested in California in 1971 for killing 25 men. The macabre record number of known victims attributed to a serial murder case set by Dean and his accomplice was surpassed only by 1978 by John Wayne Gacy, who had murdered 33 boys and young men who had attempted to influence the press coverage of the Houston mass murders to malice his victims prior to their abuse and murder. I guess that's the reason why you don't hear anything, because because John Wayne Gacy did a little bit more, but it's still an asshole. Families of Dean's victims were highly critical of the HPD, Houston Police Department, which had been quickly had been quick to list the missing boys as runaways who had not been considered worthy or any major investigation. Yeah, that does. I would be pissed too. The families of the murder youths asserted that the police should have noted an insidious intent to the patterns of disappearance of teenage boys from the Heights and neighborhood. Other family members complained that the Houston Police Department had been dismissive of their admin's insistence that their sons had no reasons to run away from home. Ever Waldrop, the father of Donald and Jerry Waldrop, complained that shortly after his sons had disappeared in 1971, he had informed the police an acquaintance had observed Dean burying what appeared to be bodies in the boat shed. In response, the police performed a perfunctory. Hold on.
Perfunctory.
Basically a lack of feeling search around the boat shed before dismissing the report as a hoax. Waldrop stated that on one of the many occasions when he visited the Houston Police Department, the police chief had simply told him, "Why are you down here? You know your boys are runaways." The mother of Georgie Mark Winkle stated, "You don't run away from home with nothing but a bathing suit and 80 cents." By May 1974, 21 of Dean's victims have been identified, with all but 4 of the youths having either lived in or had close connections to Houston Heights. Two more teenagers were identified in 1983 and 1985. One whom Richard Kemper and lived in Spring Beach, and the other had been Walter Birch, lived in Oak Forest District of Houston. The indictment on August 13th, a grand jury covered in Harris County to hear evidence against Hanley and Brooks. The first witness to testify were Williams and Curley, who testified that the events on August 7th and 8th leading to the death of Dean. Other witness who testified had experience at the hands of Dean was William Ringer. After listening to over 6 hours of testimony from various people on August 14th, the jury initially indicted Hanley on 3 counts of murder and Brooks on 1. A bail for each was set at $100,000. District attorney requested that Hanley undergo a psychological examination to determine whether he was mentally able to stand trial, but his attorney, Carl Mendler, opposed the decision, stating the move would violate Hanley's constitutional rights. By the time the grand jury had completed its investigation, Hanley was indicted for 6 murders and Brooks 4. Hanley was not charged with the death of Dean, which prosecutors ruled on September 8th as a commitment of self-defense. Now, Emmer Wayne Hanley and David Owen Brooks were tried separately for their roles in the murders. Hanley was brought to trial in San Antonio on July 1st, 1974, charged with 6 murders committed between March 1972 and July 1973. The prosecution called dozens of witnesses, including Curley and Ranger. Ranger testified that Dean's home, he was tied to the torture board and assaulted repeatedly by Dean before he was released. Others incriminating testimony came from the police officer who read from Hanley's written statement. One part of the confession, Hanley had described luring 2 of his victims for whose murder he had been brought to trial, Clubley and Jones. And Dean, Pasadena resident, Hanley had confessed that after their initial abuse and torture of Dean at Dean's home, Coble and Jones each had one wrist and ankle bound to the same side of Dean's torture board. The youths were then forced by Dean to fight each other with the premise of one who beat the other one to death would be allowed to live. After they spent several hours beating each other, Jones was tied to the floor and forced to watch as Cobble again was assaulted. Tortured and shot to death before he himself was raped, tortured, and strangled with a blind cord. Cobble and Jones were killed on July 27th, 1973, 2 days after they had been reporting missing. Several victims' parents had to leave the courtroom in regards to their composure, as police and medical examiners described how their relatives were tortured and murdered. Throughout the trial, the state introduced 82 pieces of evidence, including Dean's torture board and one of the boxes used to transport the victims. Inside the box, police had found hair which examiners concluded came from both Cobble and Hanley. Upon advance from his defense counsel, Hanley did not take the stand to testify. His attorney, William Gray, cross-examined several witnesses but did not call any witnesses or experts for the defense. Now, on Brooks was brought to trial on February 27, 1975. He had been indicted for 4 murders committed between December 1970 and June 1973, but was brought to trial charged with the June 1973 murder of 15-year-old William Ray Lawrence. Now, Brooks' defense attorney, Jimmy Skelton. Ooh, it was Johnny Skelton. It would have been a little bit close to our co-host. Argued that his client had not committed any murders and attempted to portray Dean and his lesser degree Hanley as being the active participants in the actual killings. Assistant District Attorney Tommy Dunn dismissed the defense outright. At one point, telling the jury the defendant was in on this killing and this murderous rampage. From the very beginning, he tells you he was a cheerleader, if nothing else. That's what he's telling you about his presence. You know what he was. Brooks' trial lasted less than a week. The jury deliberated. Another word I can't pronounce. Deliberated. Oh, got it right. For just 90 minutes before they reached a verdict. He was found guilty of Lawrence's murder on March 4th, 1975, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Brooks showed no evidence as the sentence was passed. Although his wife burst into tears, Brooks containing that the signed confession used against him was taken without his being informed of his legal rights, but of his dismissal in May 1979. Now, Haley's retrial began in June. Let me get to the whole thing. There we go. On July 15, 1974, both counsel presented the closing arguments to the jury. The prosecution is seeking life imprisonment. The defense, a verdict of not guilty. In the closing arguments to the jury, District Attorney Carl Vance apologized for him not being able to seek the death penalty, adding that the case was most extreme example of man's inhumanity to man I have ever seen. The jury deliberated for 92 minutes before finding Henley guilty of all 6 murders into which he was tied. The following day, on July 16th, former prosecutors to sentence Haley for 6 guilty verdicts begun on August 8th. Judge Pinkton Dial ordered that Haley serve at each 99-year sentence consecutively, total of 594 years, and he was transferred to Huntsville unit to formally begin his sentences. Henley appealed his sentence conviction, conciting the jury in his initial trial had not been sequestered. That is, attorney objected to news media being present in the courtroom had been overruled, inciting that his defense team attempted to press evidence containing that the initial trial should have not been held in San Antonio had it also been overruled by the judge. Haley appealed upon was upheld, and he was awarded a retrial in 1978. Haley retrial began June 18th, 1979. The second trial was held in Corpus Christi with Henley. I keep on going Henley. Against represented by defense attorneys William Gray and Edward Belodge. Pagelo. Haley's attorney again attempted to have Henley written statement ruled indismissible. However, Judge Nolan Kennedy ruled the written statement given to by Henley on August 9th, 1973 as admissible evidence. The retrial lasted 9 days, with Henley's attorney again calling no defense witness and again attacking the credibility of Henley's written confession. The defense also contained the evidence provided by the state belonging to Dean Corll, not Emmer Wayne Henley. On June 27, 1977, the jury deliberated for over 2 hours before reaching the verdict. Henley again was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year terms. During their incarceration, Henley is serving his life sentence in a Maxdale unit in Jefferson County, Texas. Successive parole applications dated from July 1980 had all been denied. His next available for parole is August 2025. Brooks served his life sentence at Terrell Unit near Richton, Texas. He died of COVID-related complications in Galveston Hospital on May 28th, 2020, which probably wasn't COVID-related, at the age of 65. Brooks was buried in Captain Joel Beard Cemetery in Walker County. The victims, which we won't go over. There's a lot. You can check them out. Yeah, that's about it on that one. Yeah, this is a big one and it's a long one. But let me oh, okay. No, okay. Yeah, this is pretty much it. But yeah, this is a long one and a horrible one. I think Time Suck went over it too, but yeah, I don't remember. Because every time I was like reading it, I was like remembering details, and I guess the details were from another podcast. I just forget about this guy, but yeah, really sick and twisted guy, Dean Corll. But hopefully we can get past this stupid shit that's going on in the world, because there's a lot of craziness, and this is like 1970s. This is like the peak of national news. So anyways, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and after listening to this, take a take a nice stroll through a nice meadow or something like that to get over this icky craziness. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Goodbye.